Well, welcome back to the Pastor Pod. So glad you're joining us today. We're in our third episode here, new podcast for leaders and pastors. And I'm Josh, recording from Venice, Florida, and I'm joined by my good friend Jay Mudd up in Boston. You know, Jay, it's in the 90s here, man. We're enjoying a beautiful September summer. It's humid. It rains every day. It's a tropical rainforest. What's it like at Boston? What is it like to experience
Yeah.
fall?
So we're here in mid-September now. Yeah, it's mid-September and fall is making its way in. Feel like it's a little bit early this year, but the leaves are starting to change and fall very, very, very little. But I tell you, the biggest thing, it rains here too. Right now, it's raining acorns. I don't know what's with the squirrels. I don't know if I've made them mad, but we do feel as if when we leave the house, they're throwing their acorns at us. It's crazy. I mean, you'll hear outside of you as it hits the top of our car. I feel like I'm at war sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. So fall has definitely made its way here in New England. We're beginning to experience the beginning of fall.
Now, what's winter like? I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about it.
Uh,
You know, for here we get a few weeks of chilly weather, but most of the time it's everyone from the north is here and they all have shorts on and we have jackets as Floridians.
yeah, winter here is it can be brutal. It can be it's I'm telling you, it's beautiful, right? But we'll sometimes get lots and lots of snows. Last year I had the first experience with an ice dam. I don't know if you know what that is or not. It's when
No, I
I
don't.
don't I don't even really know if I know what it is. It's when a big block of ice builds up on your roof and it can cause some major issues with your roof. And I got a little worried. I got a little ice dam on the front of my house. Got a little worried, called up some friends, was like, what do I do? They're like, pour a little bit of hot water on it. Now, I think they might have been messing with me, and I'll explain that in a minute. But I boiled some water on the stove, little pot, got a little step stool, went up, and I poured it, and it was starting to work. I was like, this is awesome, right? I'm a go big or go home kind of guy. So I was like, I'll get the biggest pot I've got in the house. And I boiled up some water and I went outside. It was my daughter's 13th birthday party. And I thought to myself, I gotta hurry up. So I didn't climb the 2 steps. I was being kind of lazy and I threw it. Now you can YouTube this, YouTube throwing boiling hot water in freezing weather. And it throws this, it like instantly turns into like steam. Well, the wind blew and Josh, it blew all over me. And I ran in, I screamed at the top of my lungs. My daughter says I threw the pot. This must have been during a blackout because I didn't know I did it. But I threw the pot, ran, and threw off my shirt
Oh,
because it was burning me. I ran into the back into a mirror, and all I saw was like, and I mean, sorry, listeners, but my skin was like messed up, third-degree burns, right? And
oh
so
my
I didn't
goodness.
want to go to the doctor. I didn't want to go. My wife's like, you should probably go. I was like, no, I'm fine. Can't we just put some Vaseline or something? I was like, what do I do? And so we called a friend of ours, a nurse friend of ours. She's like, hey, you need to go to the ER. So I went to the ER and I'll make this quick. Went to the ER and I go in and you can tell they cannot believe my story. This is a New Englander. You can tell they're like, what are you doing? Who does this?
Who does
So I tell
this?
the story. I've got this loose button up shirt on because it's like, I don't want to touch my skin. It's like on fire. You could like blow on it and I'd scream and cry. And she walks out after taking my vitals. And then 2 seconds later, I hear dun, 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 dun. And she's like, the door opens and she's kind of peeks in. She goes, can I see it? And I'm like, see what? So I unbutton my shirt and I show her and she goes, oh my. She closes the door. And I think maybe 2 minutes later, knock, 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 knock. And I swear, I don't know how many ER nurses were working that night, but every ER nurse in the hospital was like, can we see it? Can we see it? I was like a circus, person there, the freak show or something. I
Dude,
don't
the
know.
freak
It was
show. Golly. Well, I've
so to
learned
this.
today not to throw hot bowling. Of course, here it wouldn't really matter, but they,
it was
Boston.
it was it
Hey,
was it was horrible. So yeah, rule of thumb I've learned last year, and I've lived here 5 years now at this point, right? 6 years.
yeah, you've been there
Don't
for a
throw
while. Yeah.
don't throw boiling hot water on on a cold winter's day.
Listen, the Pastor Pod covers a lot of stuff, and we're here to help. We're here to serve you. So,
Well,
awkward moments with Jay. That's what we'll call that part.
that awkward moment. So Jay, I need some theme music.
I know I have a lot. I have a lot I could share.
There you go.
But that's
Well,
for
and
later.
speaking of you sharing, honestly, if we can get into what we're going to talk, I can't wait to talk about what we're going to be talking about today, Josh. I'm going to be honest. I've heard of bits and pieces of your story. It makes me a little uncomfortable, and I think what makes it uncomfortable for me is what you went through and how you transitioned in your life. How many years has it been now?
Since we've been here,
A year. So
it's
how you
been a
transitioned?
little over. It's been since April 2020 when we officially started here at the Bridge Church. So
Okay.
we, yeah,
So I want to hear, and I think it'd be beneficial because when I think of transitions, I'm gonna lie,
hmm
somebody says, "Oh, you
hmm
got to transition." I'm like, that
yeah,
makes me uncomfortable anyway.
yeah,
Add
yeah.
on the layer of transitioning during a global pandemic. I think there's something beautiful here for us to learn, and I'm looking forward to leaning in this conversation of transition. And so, Josh, I want to hear a little bit more about it, but let's talk about transitions and how
Mhm.
maybe this transition, how was this transition different from other transitions that you've been through in life?
Yeah, this was definitely not a planned COVID transition. We didn't know this was going to happen, and like everybody else listening, but I was in a season of prayer leading up to accepting the call to come to the Bridge Church as the lead teaching pastor, and so I had been in a season of seeking the Lord, and I'd been a youth pastor for 13 years. I was a teaching pastor for a couple of years, and then I was a campus pastor at a great church in Jacksonville, Florida, and that's where I was before I came here. And so we planted the North Campus, and with a great group of people. We met in two different schools with the setup teardown, and just saw God do some really cool stuff. And God had really blessed me to be a part of that. But through that 4.5 years, I really was sensing God was preparing me for what's next. One of the things I'm definitely been learning is that God's always preparing you for what's next, and transitions are always could be a transition to go to a new school, or it could be a transition to talk to someone about Christ. It could be a transition of anything, but a big move. God's always preparing us for that, and I remember I was really at a place where I didn't know what to do. I was very thankful to be there. God was working, but I felt restless, like God was saying, "Hey, Josh, I have something for you." And during that season, God brought the Bridge Church into our life, and so I started to have conversations. I received a phone call late October. We started to have good conversations about the church, and they'd been without a pastor for almost a year and a half, coming up on 2 years, in an area of Florida that I hadn't spent a lot of time. I grew up in Palm Bay, Florida. I've been in Jacksonville 2 different times. And so we just started to step forward in that. And during my interview process, it was an emotional roller coaster because the whole time, like many of you guys listening or ladies listening, when you're praying about what's next, your heart is also where you are. And I really wrestled with that. And so, God, are you saying I should go do this, or should I stay? And we had no idea 2020 was going to be 2020,
No
and
one
of course
did.
yeah, no one did. Every pastor in America had, their 2020 vision. They had their cool graphic and their 10 goals for the year. And that probably didn't go the way that we all hoped it would. But anyway, during that time, I was interviewing and praying. And of course, I didn't know if they were going to continue in the process with me. And then search team members start showing up randomly, sneaking in to hear me preach. And if you've ever been through that process, it's very awkward because you don't know what to do. You don't want to make it. You don't know if this is where God is calling you. They don't know if you're the right fit for their church. And so, through that time, God kept moving it forward. And as the church was growing and people are serving, and we had a great team there, God was making it clear that this is really good chance this is where God's calling my family to go. And we didn't know anyone here in Venice prior to being here. We didn't know anyone within probably 45 minutes of this area. And so, as we came down to the end of our interview process, it was really clear that this is what God was calling us to do on both sides. And so we go to visit around right before Christmas. We have a face to face. We're talking, and as we prepare to say yes, things start getting really weird. You start hearing all this stuff about a virus, in China. And man, as we began to pray and literally prepare to put our house on the market, everything shut down. Like, we are talking to a realtor who was petrified to go outside to put our house on the market. And of course, we were all afraid. We didn't know what to do. Everybody's locked up. We're watching the news, trying to do the right thing. And it was difficult because here we are trying to sell a house when a global pandemic starts. Of course, this was long before the housing market now. And so it was a difficult time. I mean, it was the reason it was so difficult is because it was so many unknowns. It wasn't just God was calling us to go to a new church, but it was to an area we didn't have any prior relationships, and everything was shut down. And I'll get into more of it later, but we genuinely were dealing with saying goodbye to a church that we love, and we still keep in contact with many of our friends there, not being able to say goodbye to them, because literally the Sunday that we were going to like have a time to share where we're going and have some time after church just to give our well wishes and like thank people and love people, everything shut down. The school we met at said, you know, you guys can't use our building for however long. And thankfully our main campus, they had a time to say goodbye to us. But for our campus, all the people we had spent, you know, many years just getting to know, funerals, weddings, salvation, baptisms, I didn't get to say goodbye to them officially. And so from a very emotional level, it broke our heart, because ultimately it's not about us. You know, if you've been in ministry for very long, you know, ultimately it's not about us, but it's about showing love to people. And so as we prepared to leave and we're packing up the truck, we had some great friends helping us. The church did a drive-by, you know, celebration of us with signs, and it was beautiful and amazing. And we just sat out there just in tears, just the people that came by to say, we love you and we're grateful for you. And we were able to just tell them that we love them as well. So that was awkward and weird. I mean, we didn't get to officially say goodbye to our church family there. But like I told the church when I did share the news, I said, you know, it's ultimately not about me. If you stop coming to this church because of me, you've missed the whole point of what it means to be a part of a church family. To keep continuing to share the gospel, keep making disciples, because at the end of the day, it's not about any of us. Every pastor is an interim pastor. It might be 5 years, it might be 20, it might be 40. All of us are here for a short time. We have a job God's called us to do, and that's to bring glory to Him. So it was emotional. It was difficult. So around February, we were putting our house in the market. We said goodbye to the church, and it was difficult for my family, but we were also excited about that. So,
wow. So I heard you say God is always preparing you for what's next. How cool to think about that. When you said that, I was like, whoa, that's big. So let's talk about this a little bit different level, right? So this is you, and you kind of alluded to like how your family interacted with that, but you have a wife and multiple kids. How did this impact them? You know, what impact did this have on your family, this type of transition in this type of world? Let us in a little bit about that.
Well, I'm married to an amazing person. You know, she's flexible. She's called to ministry to serve the Lord in the way God's gifted her. And this is a transition that when we were praying about what was next for us, in the past, like when we were leaving to go plant a church, it took her a while to come around to that idea. And I think you could probably relate to that, Jay, or any church planner. And this time around, I really felt like God had already given her a green light, that God was maybe leading us to go somewhere and do something new. And so she was ready at that heart level. And so she encouraged me to be open to talk to the Bridge Church and to step into that and see if God was in it. And so we started to pray for that. Our kids, we didn't tell them, of course, till everything was really clear. And that was hard because our kids are getting older and they ask questions. And it was hard on them because our kids, you know, Micah and Hannah specifically grew up there. Micah came to Christ at the church there, was baptized in a tank that we put on the floor on a middle school, right, you know, cafetorium. I mean, it was so many wonderful memories of set up and tear down every Friday night, and just the hard work of planting and building relationships. So once COVID hit and we knew we were moving, we're packing the house with hardly any relational time with people. So that was hard. I mean, I was literally driving every week back and forth down to Venice to record sermons online once we started the transition. So I'm driving once a week to meet the staff getting to know a new pastor, and also preaching to a church I've never met. So I'm literally like, hey, my name's Josh, and I'm here now. I'm not here yet, but I'm here.
Right,
So
right,
the
right.
people
Wow.
were awesome. We a lot of phone calls, a lot of Zoom, a lot of emails, and they were amazing to welcome my family so well. So we met the family by bringing the kids and Cassidy into the room where we recorded, like and they met the kids that way. And Micah broke out and doing the floss dance and dab. I
Oh,
mean, the whole
wow.
church met. I mean, they met us. This is who we are. This is
That's
the
right.
Robinsons. So they were awesome, man. It was great. And so once we signed our closing documents, we loaded the truck up, and this was the hardest part on my family. We get in the truck, we drive to Venice, about 4.5 hours. We arrive at this rental house to stay in for about 5 days until we closed on a contingent offer on our house here in Venice. Well, the bank was apparently not telling the truth and told us that the person that was buying the house was never even past the first step. So they let me sign for the house without telling me that the person was even approved. So I'm sitting in a rental house, which was a great spot. It was near the beach. It was amazing. It was like an unplanned vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And my realtor called and said, "I'm so sorry. The whole deal fell through." So I'm talking to the guy. I'm like, here we are in a new town. We're homeless. We still have a house, and this house is a contingent offer. And so we're sitting there just like crying out to God again, like, you've called us here. We know you're going to provide. And God worked out a miraculous way for us to be able to close on that home while having another offer that we had to wait another month and a half, almost 2 months to close on. But through that time, God showed up in an incredible way. Money was super tight. But once we closed on our home, literally the next day, we received that first stimulus check that hit everybody's bank account. So
right. I forgot
I'm
about
not,
those.
it's hard to kind of talk about that because I don't want to make that over spiritual. But for us, it was kind of like, who would have thought that would have happened? And it just helped us in those next few weeks until we closed on our home. And so financially, God showed up and proved his faithfulness. Emotionally, people came alongside us and blessed us. And so, yeah, that was hard. But we told our kids, hey, we're going on an adventure. Like, this is going to be an adventure. And so they really embraced it, and they're young and flexible. And now they tell me all the time, Daddy, I'm so glad I'm in Venice. Can we never leave?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So
Wow. What a remarkable story of how God, took care of your family
yeah.
through all that transition.
And it's that
Even
principle that God showed us, is that if I'm calling you somewhere, I'm going to provide. And it's not always going to be the way you think it'll be.
right.
And
It
it's
might
usually
be
going to be in my timing. It's not
right.
going to be the way, it's not always going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to be a journey of faith. And so God showed that to us so well. And we're just
Wow.
grateful for that.
That's good. That's good. So I mean, I feel even weird even asking this, but I mean, I've heard so many different parts that were challenging. If you had to sum everything together and go, this is probably the most difficult part of all of it. This was the most
Yeah.
challenging part. What would you say that is? Because I mean, there's so many different parts and so many different moving
Yeah.
pieces.
Yeah. I mean, there's COVID-19. There's just moving. Moving's not fun. Packing, dealing with all the stress of that. But I think more than anything, it was not only moving to a new church, not having a prior chance to like get to know people, like actually sit around a table or have a dinner and like get to know their story. That was
Right.
the hardest part. I felt like I didn't have a starting point with knowing the people well. But through a lot of phone calls and a lot of Zoom and different ways, God really provided that. But then COVID-19, I mean, just the challenges of navigating that and knowing how do we open up safely? How do we deal with taking care of people's needs? Everybody was dealing with it differently. Everybody had their own opinion, right? So I didn't really have a honeymoon. I mean, but at the same time, I really felt like I got to know people really quickly because they told me what they felt, like
There you
right
go.
away.
Right.
We opened up in one way, and then we made an adjustment a few months later, and whether we had a mask on or not, or we asked them to wear one, and some people didn't come back, and then some people came, and then we switched it around, and then the other half of the church was mad at us. And so it was great. I got to know both sides real well, so it was hard, but it was also like, you know what, like I'm getting to know people's true self. And thankfully God united us through all that. even with everybody's different opinions.
Pivot, 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 pivot. That's what I
Yeah,
keep
it's
hearing.
pivot. Yeah,
Pivot,
literally like
pivot,
pivot, pivot, pivot.
pivot.
And I'm like, where's the book on COVID-19, like for church leaders?
They
I'm sure
didn't.
there's a bunch right now you can go
Oh,
buy,
I'm
but
sure
there
everybody's.
was no book to read.
No, no, no. We hadn't prepared for that.
No.
So yeah. So let's see here. You've highlighted multiple things, but I think it'd be helpful for us to really understand from your perspective of how you saw God at work in the midst of I'm going to call it chaos. I mean, it
Yeah.
seemed as if chaos. You were didn't have a house, you didn't get to say goodbye to everybody. There's emotions running every way possible. Your kids are having to go through this, your wife, you, these people that you know that you've done funerals and weddings, and now there's new people who your first interaction may have been like, I don't like that. I don't know, right? I don't know your people, but it could have been because if any pastor tells me during COVID-19 they didn't hear somebody say, I don't like the way we're doing things, they're
Right.
lying, right?
Right.
Everybody heard that. So tell me, how did you see God in the midst of all this?
So I think for me, it was learning that I've got to be dependent. I've got to lean on my elders and my staff,
Mm,
and also other pastors, just saying, hey, what are we learning? How do we improve? How do we do the right thing? Not only did the church, meet a new pastor online. So, I mean, for them, it was a big change, but not only that, we moved locations during COVID. We were at a different high school. And because of the protocol, we were not going to, who knew when we'd be able to meet again. And so around June of 2020, we decided to move to another location that had less protocols, that we could meet safely and take all those steps. And so we moved to a different part of town. So I basically went against every church planning book. You don't do those things. New pastor, new location, but our leadership, we all felt like God was saying go. And so I learned through that season that although it was a new location, a new place, we began to meet new people that maybe we would have never connected with where we were before.
mm.
And our church was flexible. I mean, the Bridge Church has been in 16 locations in 20 years. So
Wow.
this church's DNA was change, was flexibility, willing to do whatever it takes, right? I know you talk about that a lot at your church, doing whatever it takes, right, to reach people with Jesus. And so when I came here, I was like, man, this is my people. This is a blessing to be a part of this church family, as well as our past church family. And so it was chaotic. We moved to a new building. We made it happen. It was actually a better spot. We less setup and tear down, and God began to grow us through that season, and we started to see new families. And so in February of 2021, we had started actually planning in fall of 2020 to start a generosity campaign, a capital campaign to raise funds to build our first campus on a really growing area. And we have 22 acres that God had already provided the church. The church paid in cash. The land's worth way more than what they paid for it. So God's hand has been on this church long before I showed up here. I think a monkey could have got up on stage and said, hey, we should build a first campus, after 20 years of roaming the area in different portable places. And so we started a campaign in February of 2021. I don't know if that was the norm for churches coming out of COVID or actually entering back into COVID. I don't really know if it's ended. So depends on who you ask, right?
Mhm.
So man, we started that. We believe God said go. Our elders, our staff, our leadership. And so February of this year, we started a capital campaign to raise money to build our first campus, and to be able to send out, hopefully church planners as well down the road. So yeah, fast forward the tape, man. Here we are in September, and people have generously stepped up, and I can't tell you just how grateful I am to see God's hand in it. And I talked to a lot of consultants. We have some great guys that helped us through that process. And it says, yeah, we're not getting any calls right now from churches doing a campaign. I said, yeah, I'm not sure if this is what we should do, but we felt like God was saying, step out in faith and see me work. And so the church had been ready for years. And I'm just the person here to say, hey, let's go.
Wow. Wow. So good.
And
So
Hebrews
good.
11, kept coming to my heart through this year. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. And I believe that the church, and I don't just mean my church, any church that is seeking to live out gospel focused life, I mean, pastors and leaders and people, when we live out the gospel, that means the life of faith. That means that we are going to have to push forward even when things don't always make sense, and do it with wisdom, count the cost, but more than anything, trust that God is going to come through, and He is the leader of His church.
That's right.
That I'm not the ultimate leader. You're not the leader of your church. He is,
That's
and
right.
all the powers of hell will not prevail against it, even in COVID-19, even in a crazy political, angry, divided culture. That God is still working. God is still on His throne. He has proven Himself faithful, even beyond what we've talked about today, even beyond my transition or any transition that you'll take or will take.
Right.
Anyone listening today will take. But um, I'm just encouraged by it. God's really growing me in this, reminding me of who He is and who I'm not.
There you go. So I mean that that's good. And I think it's important that we even digest that when God's doing all of this and God's at work in all this, it really, you kind of look in the mirror, right? And you start looking in the mirror and you learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about, even some deep rooted things that you didn't even know were there. So through this whole process, this whole idea of transition,
Mhm.
if we're mindful, we can learn a lot about ourselves. So Josh, what did you
Mhm.
learn about yourself in this process of transition?
Man, to be honest with you, I'm a recovering control freak. I struggle with control. I am, I guess you could call me type A, driven, whatever you filled in the blank. And I think you can relate to me, Jay. But God is proving over and over, I'm in control. I'm already ahead of you. Just walk in faith,
Mm,
walk in my spirit, follow my word, keep preaching the gospel. And I think more than anything, keep the main thing when everybody else wants to make lesser things the main thing. And that's a big struggle for, I think, every pastor in America today. How do we continue to keep the gospel focused? How do we keep the mission at the forefront of the church, versus all of these lesser non-essential things that do matter, but what ultimately matters and what ultimately changes people's lives is the gospel, is Jesus Christ impacting someone's heart. And through repentance and faith, they're forgiven, saved, and they're set from their sin. That's what's going to change us in every other realm of society. So, that's what I'm learning, is stop trying to control it and learn how to trust and surrender it to God, but step out in faith, knowing that God is working, know that God is faithful in it, and to be flexible. And I think, with all that said, that's the big thing that I'm learning through this time, and that ultimately it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about what I bring to the table. It's not about our church. It's not about us getting any of the attention. It's ultimately, at the end of the day, giving Him the glory. And I know that sounds cliche on the Pastor Pod, because that's what the Pastor Pod would say, right? But at the
right.
end of the day, man, it's walking every day saying, God, I want you to be glorified. I'm willing to take risk. I'm willing to step out in faith, whether that's talking to my neighbor about Jesus, whether that's being patient with my family member, whether that's, moving across the state or moving across the country or going on a mission, uh, whatever that is, learn to just have open hands and not try to control it and make it fit me.
Mm,
And so it's been an adventure, and I'm thankful I'm a part of it. I'm thankful I'm a part of what God wants to do. And so every pastor, every leader listening, for you, it's the same principle. God has called you, God has uniquely wired you to do something for Him. And it doesn't have to be in the pastoral ministry, it could be in any realm of society. God has called and gifted you to bring Him glory. And it's an adventure that none of us want to miss out on, because we see lives changed. We see we see hope given to a world that is broken right now and hopeless. And I believe that right now we have a awesome opportunity to pivot and say, listen, there is an answer to what you're going through, right?
mm,
There is hope when things are falling apart. And I think if we step into that, we're going to continue to see not only a revival of the church where people are reminded of who we are, but man, see more people saved, see a movement of God where we just see just families and communities transform. And we've got to keep the main thing, because that's what's going to change America. That's what it's going to change, and beyond. So
Wow, that is so
That's my sermon for the day.
so good. It's so good. I'm taking it all in. I'm listening, and I really do believe the future belongs to those who are willing to pivot when everyone else is not willing to change.
That's right.
That's what the future belongs to, right? And so we need to be those
Hmm.
types of leaders that are willing to pivot,
That's
willing
right.
to change. I know that word sometimes comes with a lot of weight, change, right? Depending
Yes,
on the environment you're in. So,
that's right.
but listen, I got a couple takeaways just from listening to you, and I'm being a learner here. And so, as I'm taking notes, as I'm listening to you, I'm looking at this idea of transition. I'm learning a lot that, what I see taking place, and thanks to your story and what God has shown you. And I got a couple takeaways here that I'm walking away with, right? And so I want to share those. So one takeaway is, transitions are a way that, God growing us. It's a way of God growing us, right? Sometimes
Mhm.
we're looking for the wrong thing. We're looking for answers of, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? When really we need to
Yeah.
be looking for purpose. So not looking for answers, but looking for purpose. God, what are you
Mhm.
doing? What are you teaching me through all of this, right? It may be lessons about ourselves. Sometimes it's, putting us in a place where we can leverage our gifts and our talents. Sometimes I think some of the greatest talents we have laying around are on the sidelines. They're not even being engaged. They're not
Mm.
even being used. And a
Mhm.
transition could be something that thrusts us into a spot where God says, this is where you're supposed to be. And it's a
Mhm.
good thing, right? So it's a way of growing
Mhm.
our faith. I heard you say this multiple times. Transitions are not about you, only you, right?
Mhm.
There's more happening around the scenes, right? So we didn't even get into that. What did the church in Jacksonville learn through this transition?
Mhm.
What did the
Mhm.
bridge learn through this transition? What's your family learned through this transition? One famous author, I don't even have to say his name. Most people are going to know who it is, says, God's doing 10,000 things around you. You might only be aware of 3 of them.
Oh.
Think about that for a second. It's like,
Mm.
wow, he's moving all these pieces, and I'm just a part of that.
That's right.
And it's an awesome opportunity, as I say often, get to pull up that front row seat and watch God at work, right? And then again, you emphasized over and over and over, transitions remind us of who God is, right? He's in control. We're not. You said that.
Mhm.
That was one of your big takeaways. He's in control. You're not, right? He's sovereign over everything. Nothing takes
Mhm.
him by surprise. You're sitting in that Airbnb, and he's like, wait, watch, my friend,
That's
watch what I'm
right.
about to do, right?
Mhm.
Stimulus check. Boom. There you go. I'm going to take care of you.
I don't think there's been a whole lot of stimulus check testimonies, but and
Right,
I've not
right, right,
shared
right.
that with a lot of people. But it's like, yeah, God just He takes care of us, man. As we're faithful to Him and we're obedient. I mean, He has never ever let me down.
Right. We're reminded. Scripture teaches us over and over. God will
Ever
never
over and
leave
over.
us or
That's
forsake
right.
us.
That's right.
And that's a huge takeaway
That's
from
right.
this. So we can learn a lot about transitions, and almost is
Hmm.
there's this concept that like transitions don't have to be a negative. What if we
That's right.
view transition as like there's a positive coming out of this?
Hmm.
God's going to do something miraculous, and I get to be a
Yeah.
part of it. Oh, I get
Yeah.
to be a part of that, right?
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing your
Yeah.
story. It's good.
I hope this has encouraged everyone that's listening today. I hope that you know that I know for me and I know for Jay, we are learning every day how to become more like Jesus, and we have a long way to go. And I hope this podcast can be a conversation as we answer your questions, as we talk about some of these bigger topics over the next few months. We want you to know that we hope this ministers to you and encourages you.
Mm.
And we're glad you joined us today. We're glad you jumped back in. This is our third podcast, Jay. I mean, can you believe we made it this far?
Oh, we've come so far.
We've come so far. And
So
so
far.
if you are listening, or maybe you're watching on YouTube, remember to subscribe and follow. We want you to come along with us. If this
Right.
was helpful to you, if this has been any way helpful or encouraging to you, share it with another leader, another pastor. We'd love to be able to bless them and encourage them in any way we can. If you have questions, if you have any questions, we already had a couple come in. You can send those to our email address, thepastorpod@gmail.com, and we want to be able to answer those questions as we continue. So, Jay, man,
Yeah.
it's been fun.
It's been great time. Great time. Always good. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for everyone who's listening. And we look forward to our next episode.
Yeah, see you next time.
See you next time.